Now, as I was saying about the language, since we have a countless number of lexical suffixes for the nouns and prefixes for the adjectives or verbs or the insertions, therefore a lot of the words are the suffixes and prefixes are unknown to us. Now we have completely lost the meanings of those words which we speak once in a while. And I have attempted to ask the old timers what they meant. They said they don't know. Now, as the priest said back in 1879 that any attempt to write all the words in the Flathead language would be attempting the impossible, because it could cover probably 3 or 4 volumes of Webster's Joint Dictionary. Oh my gosh, that would run into probably 1 million or more words. That is using those lexical suffixes for the verbs, adjectives, and nouns. Now you have to know the Flathead language real well to recognize most of those words when they are spoken, but since some of those words are now lost and we have no way of being able to translate them. And unfortunately the language here on the reservation has gone down the hill because of the intermarriage. When the Flatheads marry other tribal members, and now the kid or the kids could have had the opportunity to learn their parents' languages with ease, but the parents are always too lazy to teach their kids their own tongues, so it's lost right then and there. So a lot of the present day kids who have parents of like Flathead, Blackfeet or whatever, then they don't even know the Flathead language at all. As a result, they have to get somebody to teach them at the Ronan schools or the reservation schools to try to revive our language. Now, because of that, the language itself will never be spoken with fluency like we do now, because in order to learn the language, a student should have several years of a student should have several years of teaching in order to be able to speak the language. But we have, in my case, I taught just the first year of Flathead, and then because of that they could just barely speak now, and but they could not understand it. Although I have gotten the students to write down about 3,000 words in their notebooks. Now, in order for them to learn how, they would have to learn all those 3,000 words. And if they were to listen to the Flathead language being spoken, they could catch a word every now and then. Then they'd have a vague idea what they were talking about. Now, in my case, I have a little over 600 words in my glossary list of terms in the Kootenai language, and I could catch a word every now and then, and also have an idea what the Kootenays are talking about. And but they do have a different method of teaching the languages. Now, I don't recall what that word is, but it sounds fascinating to me. If I were a few years younger, I would attempt to learn that myself. Probably learn more about Kootenays and Blackfeet, Crows, and possibly French Spanish and Chinese and Japanese. Those are the languages I would love to learn. And then, of course, I would try my best to learn a lot more about English. I just barely touched upon the English language, so I don't speak it with as much of a fluency as I would like to. And now the kids at the present time will be up against losing the language in the future, because when we old-timers pass on, in which the language is no longer spoken with fluency, then they're going to have a tough time perpetuating the language. And what there will be left of the language will be the students who are learning the language now, which is just a drop in the bucket. And then an attempt will be to revive that language in the future. Now, I do have a Salish dictionary, which I bought from Lloyd King, which was published in 1879. I was thinking about donating that dictionary, a copy of it, to some worthy outfit who will be in very good hands in the future. Now, I have lost all my notes to one of my nieces. She borrowed my book, which was a course in the Flathead language. I thought she would return it in a short time, but she hasn't. And I have attempted to come in contact with her to return my notes, but I have not succeeded. Now, in order to rewrite it, it takes almost a year of painstaking work to write those notes down. Now, at the beginning, when I was hired to teach the Flathead language here in Ronan High School, I'd stay up all night preparing my lessons for the next day. And then my wife would come into the dining room and see me writing. Then all she'd say is, "Jesus Christ," and then she'd turn around and I'd go back to bed. Several days later, I'd again be staying up all night. Then she'd again come into the bedroom and she'd be wearing a dirty frown. Again, she'd say, "Jesus Christ," and she'd turn back and go to bed by herself. And so therefore, as far as I know, the future is pretty dark for the Flathead language now. Now, that also applies to other languages, Indian languages all over America, well, in fact in North America too. But some Indians are very fortunate that they are quite capable of perpetuating their language, like the Crows. And in fact, they have a little trouble in their case when the grade school kids enter the first grade. They know very little English because the Crow language is spoken damn near all the time. Now, the Navajos are capable of perpetuating their language. There are well over 100,000 of them, and I think most of them do know their own language. Now, one good thing about the Indian languages is that during the wars, they have had, like the Navajos, to speak to one another secretly on a phone about the military maneuvers. But now it might be that the enemy could easily learn the Navajo language, and then they would know what they were talking about, but they could have the languages of other Indians to speak, giving military information from one area to another on a phone or radio or whatever. And then they'd have a tough time deciphering what the information was about. And
can you tell me why, for the Flathead people themselves, what's important about keeping the language strong?
Well, when we Indians get together, we naturally love to speak our own language. Now, in my case, when I go to the Nez Perce country or see Nez Perces around here, I am tickled and glad to speak my own native tongue, the Nez Perce. And I speak the Flathead language every chance I get around here. That is with people who speak the language or understand it. Now, whenever I meet or see his sister Arlene, then her and I try to talk in the Flathead as much as we can, what little she knows. And it gives me a beautiful feeling to know that she's interested enough to try to perpetuate the language, although she knows very little. Well, she has had only a year of my class in the Flathead language. And whenever you see Indians get together, usually at the powwows, you will hear a lot of different tribes speaking their own tongues to one another, like the Flatheads, Nez Perces, Blackfeet, Crees, Crows, and whatever. And now, what we hate to have outsider come around and tell us we should not speak our own tongue because, well, they naturally think that we are talking about them. There's no such goddamn thing that we're talking about them. And why in the hell should we be talking about it unless they have a guilty conscience about something? And that's what I hate about some outsider coming, and I'd be told, why don't you speak English instead of your tongue? They're still trying to stop us from speaking our own language. Well, it's a well-known fact that 50, 60, 70 years ago, the kids in the various schools were discouraged about speaking their own language. Otherwise, they would be punished for that. But one good thing is that these days they are sure trying awful hard to perpetuate all the language around the world. There are a little over 2,900 languages spoken around the world, and there are all federally funded or funded by the various governments to perpetuate those languages. And they don't want to see any of those languages become extinct. And to me, it's fun to be able to speak my own two native tongues, the Nez Perce and Flathead language. Now, some of the Kootenays think that I can speak or understand their language well, but I do not. As a lot of times the Kootenays have told a little lie. They'd say Larry Parker knows and understands the Kootenai, which I do not. Now, what other question do you have in mind?
Maybe you could just tell us about what it was like for you to go to school for the first time as a young boy and not know any English.
Well, believe you me, that sure put a hardship on my schooling there, because I did not know a word of English. It would be just like you going to China or Russia or somewhere and attending the school there and not knowing their language at all. You'd be completely lost. Now, fortunately, we did have some Flathead kids and my older sister. Then, in the desperation, I would ask one of those Flathead kids who were in the upper grades to ask the teacher what they wanted us to do. Then they'd ask the teacher what was expected of us or something. Then they would tell me in the Flathead language what to do, or my sister would tell me what the teacher wanted me to do or didn't want me to do in the Nez Perce language. And well, it was awful hard, and I'm glad I never will have to go through that again. So therefore, whenever the Indian kids do go to school, the parents do try very hard to get their kids to know English before they enter school. As a matter of fact, they don't even have any trouble now because the parents of two different tribes will be speaking English all the time. Therefore, their kids know the English language real well, so they have no trouble there. But in my case, it was different. It took me several years to learn how to speak the English language, and I still haven't quite learned it the way I would like to. And what do you have else?
Well, I'm just wondering if how the teachers treated you at that time.
Well, they were kind enough to have a lot of patience because they knew that there were other kids in the class, like Mexican kids and German kids, and nationalities of other nationalities of other world. I mean, around the world, like Swedes and whatever they were in school, who did not speak English too well, and I guess the teachers were told to be patient, not to get sore at us for not knowing the English language, because they would be told if you did go to their country and were not be able to speak their language, you'd have an awful tough time, and you could not be punished for that.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the history of alcohol use among the Indian people here.
Oh yeah, I do know that right at the present time, some of the Flatheads and the Kootenays and Nez Perces and other tribes have either very little or nothing left in their homes that is personal property or worldly goods, because they have been hawking or selling their things just for the sake of satisfying their alcohol, thirst for alcohol. And then when they do get hold of the money, then they like to act like a big shot. Like when we get a per capita payment, then they'll go to a bar and they'll say, I'm buying drinks for the whole bar. Oh, Jesus. Now, by doing that, they'll be broke in about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then they'll be bums again for the rest of the year until the next per capita payment comes. And of course, that alcohol sure has wrecked countless number of marriages. And now, on rare occasions, some flathead will quit drinking altogether, then he begins to lead a beautiful, normal married life, or not only married, but a good life from then on. Now, I had a neighbor here who were alcoholics, a man and his wife. They'd have a quarrel almost every day, and he'd kick his wife out and throw her stuff out in the lawn. He'd tell her, this is your stuff, now take it away from here. However, I found out later that they both quit drinking now. They both act like a lovesick kids these days. They're like on a perpetual honeymoon. I'm glad for that. Now that's what damn alcohol does. It just ruins people's lives, and they are always broke and have nothing left in the house to hawk or sell. But those of us who do not drink at all now realize that it sure is a beautiful feeling not to have to hawk my things just to satisfy my thirst for alcohol. But I do know that I have one bad vice. I like to play poker once in a while. That's why people, bar owners, usually come after me. I expect one of them to be coming after me in about possibly 3 hours or so, or 4 hours to go down to play a little poker. Then when I do get money ahead, then I love to go down to Jackpot, Reno, or Las Vegas. I go down there to just to have fun, and but I do know that these days I'm beginning to be smart enough to limit my losses. Now, I do not attempt to gamble too much and wire home for some more money, and because that's getting to be too dang expensive for me. And therefore, I do know that I will continue to play a little poker every now and then. And one thing I love to play the most is that one-arm bandit. And to me, that's fun. It's by watching those tumblers. When I see a bar, then I sometimes am tempted to let out a war whoop. That's exactly what happened at Jackpot a few years ago. One of the bar owners brought me down there. He was going after some gym outfit for his brother-in-law. When he went into that 94 Barton's casino, then he looked around. There was no Indians around there, but all of a sudden he heard a terrifying, blood-curdling war whoop. And then he saw it was me when I hit the jackpot, $600. And then I had been hitting other jackpots during the 2 days there, and that's the only time that I came home winners. But the rest of the time I have been coming back home talking to myself as a loser. But I have learned to limit my losses. Now, like tonight, when they come after me, all they will be able to get from me is only about $20 and no more. I'm not going to dig and dig and dig, because it's too hard to recover when you lose too much.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever drink yourself?
No, I